Welcome back, dear soul. If this video found its way to you today, I need you to understand that it wasn't random chance. Somewhere inside you, there is a question you haven't quite figured out how to put into words yet. A quiet thought that keeps returning when the world becomes silent. A feeling you try to ignore during the day but somehow becomes louder when you are alone with your own mind. Maybe you have been searching for answers about someone you love. Maybe you have been trying to understand their distance, their silence, their mixed signals, or the emotions they seem unable to express. Maybe you have spent countless moments wondering why someone who once felt close suddenly became hard to reach, why they pull away when things become deeper, why they seem to care but struggle to show it in the way your heart needs. Or perhaps this journey is not about another person at all. Perhaps it is about you. The version of yourself that has been waiting to be understood, the part of you that has carried questions, disappointments, and invisible wounds while still trying to keep moving forward. The part of you that has given love, patience, and understanding, yet sometimes wondered if anyone truly sees the effort you make. Today, I want you to listen with an open heart, because what you are about to discover may change the way you see relationships, emotions, and human behavior. Sometimes the things that confuse us the most are not signs that something is wrong. Sometimes they are clues revealing a deeper story happening beneath the surface. Human beings are complicated. We do not always say what we feel. We do not always act according to what exists in our hearts. Some people chase when they feel afraid of losing someone. Others create distance when they feel afraid of needing someone. Some people build walls not because they feel nothing, but because feeling too much makes them feel vulnerable. And when you understand this, you begin to look beyond the surface. You stop seeing every silence as rejection. You stop interpreting every moment of distance as a lack of care. You begin to recognize that behind certain behaviors there may be fears, past experiences, emotional patterns, and protective mechanisms that a person has carried for years. But this understanding is not about chasing someone harder. It is not about losing yourself while trying to decode another person's heart. It is about gaining awareness. It is about learning the difference between love and attachment, between patience and self-abandonment, between understanding someone and forgetting your own worth. Because your heart deserves clarity, your peace deserves protection, and your life deserves relationships where love does not feel like a constant puzzle you have to solve. So stay with me until the end, because today we are going to explore the hidden emotions, unspoken feelings, and psychological patterns that often exist beneath the words people say and the actions they show. Sometimes the answers we search for outside are the same answers that lead us back to ourselves. And perhaps this moment is not about finding someone else's truth. Perhaps it is about discovering your own. A feeling you've carried through those early morning hours when the rest of the world is asleep and your heart is still wide awake, circling the same thought over and over. This person cannot stop loving you, and yet they feel compelled to keep their distance. And somehow, someway, you already sensed this long before anyone put it into words. You felt it in the gaps between what they said, in the way they'd look at you and then look away almost immediately. In a distance they created that never quite made logical sense because everything else about them told you they still cared deeply. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just psychology on paper. It's the truth that lives quietly underneath all that silence. And it's time you finally heard it spoken out loud, clearly, without any of the softening we usually do to make hard truths easier to swallow. There's a very particular kind of pain that the world has never really given a proper name to. It isn't the clean, simple grief of being told outright that you're not loved. It isn't the straightforward sting of rejection, where someone looks you dead in the eyes and says plainly, "I don't want this." No, this pain runs far more complicated than that. This is the pain of being loved quietly, secretly, almost desperately by someone who refuses to let themselves love you in the open. It's the experience of existing inside a connection that has no real name, because it's far too real to be considered nothing, and yet somehow never allowed to grow into something either. And if you've ever lived through that particular experience, you already know the confusion it stirs up is unlike anything else, because you aren't grieving a loss in the traditional sense. You're grieving a presence. You're mourning something that is still very much alive, still breathing, still feeling every bit of it, and still refusing to move toward you anyway. That's an extremely specific, extremely lonely kind of suffering. Carl Jung once said that everything which irritates us about other people can actually lead us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves. I'd take that idea a step further. Everything that confuses us about how someone chooses to love us, every contradiction, every moment of closeness that's suddenly followed by withdrawal, none of it is random. It isn't cruelty either. It's psychology. It's history. It's the internal architecture of a person's inner world, built long before you ever entered their life, quietly shaping how they experience love, not as some simple, uncomplicated emotion, but as something deeply tangled up with their oldest wounds. When someone loves you and simultaneously keeps their distance, they aren't actually sending you two conflicting messages. They're sending you one single message, and that message says, I want you more than I've ever known how to want anything in my life. And that reality terrifies me completely. Think for a moment about the true nature of deep fear. Not the simple fear of walking into a dark room, but the primal, bone-deep fear that lives buried inside the architecture of someone's soul. The fear of being truly, fully seen. The fear of reaching out for something only to lose it all over again. The fear of needing another person so completely that their absence wouldn't just hurt, it would actually unmake you from the inside out. When a person has been genuinely broken by someone they once trusted completely, their nervous system learns an entirely new language. It learns to read love not as safety, but as danger. And so the heart develops a kind of split consciousness. One half of it reaches toward you, drawn helplessly to your warmth like someone who's been starved of sunlight for far too long, and the other half pulls back, manufacturing distance, inventing reasons to stay away. Not because the love has disappeared, but because the love is so real, so overwhelming, so terrifyingly present that it feels exactly like standing at the edge of a cliff for someone who's already fallen once before and nearly didn't survive the landing. I want you to really sit with what it must feel like to be that person, to love someone the way you love the feeling of finally coming home, and to look directly at that love and feel, deep in your bones, that you simply cannot have it. Not because the love isn't genuine, not because the other person did anything wrong, but because some old, frightened, deeply wounded part of them genuinely believes that reaching for this kind of love is inviting catastrophe. That needing someone this much is essentially handing them the exact instrument of your own destruction. This isn't manipulation. This isn't some dramatic performance. This is a real human being living inside a psychological prison they may not even fully understand themselves, loving you with every single breath they take, and believing at the deepest, most irrational level of their being that staying away is somehow the only way to keep the both of you safe. Jung spoke about something he called the persona. The mask people wear to move through the world, the constructed version of self that looks capable, unaffected, completely in control. And beneath that mask, he said, lives the shadow. All the desires, all the fears, all the needs we've buried over time because somewhere along the way we learned that feeling them too deeply was dangerous territory. This person who loves you while keeping their distance, they've built an especially strong persona. Maybe they come across as independent, self-sufficient, even a little cold at times. But underneath that carefully constructed persona sits a shadow that knows something entirely different. A shadow that knows exactly how much it needs you. A shadow that carries your name around like a secret it can't put down. That has memorized the specific sound of your laughter. That reaches for you in the quiet hours of the night and finds nothing but silence waiting there instead. And the reason they stay away isn't because that shadow isn't real. It's because the shadow is so overwhelmingly real that the persona simply cannot survive admitting it exists. To let the mask slip, even for a moment, would mean facing everything they've spent years trying not to feel. There's a pattern that shows up again and again in the psychology of love, particularly in people who experienced what attachment researchers refer to as insecure attachment. Children raised in environments where love wasn't consistent, where the very people meant to keep them safe sometimes did and sometimes didn't. These children absorb a devastating lesson early on. They learn that love is not something constant or guaranteed. They learn that the very people they need the most are also the people most capable of wounding them the deepest. And they learn this deep within the nervous system in a way no amount of adult logic can fully undo later on to protect themselves from the exact thing they need most. To love only in fragments, to give just enough but never too much, to stay present but never too present. To care from a careful distance, one where the caring itself can never turn into a vulnerability, can never become the rope that drags them under the moment the other person lets go. And here's the heartbreaking part of that pattern, the part that makes you feel like you might genuinely be losing your mind, like you must be imagining all of it. It's invisible from the outside. The person living inside this pattern doesn't announce their wound to anyone. They simply withdraw. They pull back at the exact moment things are becoming beautiful between you. They go quiet at precisely the moment silence hurts the most. And from where you're standing, if you don't understand what's actually happening underneath the surface, it looks like indifference. It looks like outright rejection. It looks like you must not be enough, but you are enough. You have always been enough. What's actually happening here has very little to do with your worth, and almost everything to do with their fear. A fear that existed long before you and will keep existing long after, unless it's finally faced head-on. There's a specific moment in this whole journey I want to call out directly, because so many of you have already lived through it yourselves. It's the moment you started questioning yourself. The moment the confusion grew so loud in your head that you turned it inward and started wondering what's wrong with me. Why does my love, which is real and warm and given so freely, never seem like enough to break through the wall they've built around themselves? Why, no matter what I do, is there always this distance I can't seem to close no matter how far I reach? And in that moment, something deeply unfair happened to you. You started carrying their wound as though it were somehow your own failure. You started shrinking yourself, or reaching harder, giving more, being endlessly patient, as though the solution was simply loving loudly enough to drown out their fear entirely. And neither approach ever worked, because neither one was ever actually the real question to begin with. Jung believed the relationship we have with another person is, at some level, always a mirror, reflecting the relationship we have with ourselves. So the real question this whole experience is asking of you, the question buried underneath all the pain and longing, is this: what do you actually believe you deserve? Not the polished answer you'd give someone at a dinner party, but in the quiet of your own heart, in your most honest, unguarded moments, what do you truly believe you're worthy of receiving? Because here's something I've noticed again and again in the psychology of love. We don't accidentally find ourselves tangled up with people whose wounds mirror our own. The person who stays distant while loving you often shows up in the life of someone who, at some deep and perhaps unexamined level, is also a little afraid of being fully received, of being truly seen, of being loved so completely that there's nowhere left to hide from it. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because it might be the single most liberating truth in this entire conversation. Because if this experience is partly a mirror, if the person who can't fully come toward you is actually reflecting something you yourself carry about your own worthiness of complete love, then the transformation here doesn't depend entirely on them changing. It depends on you. And that isn't a burden to carry. That's a doorway. That's exactly where your power has been living this whole time, waiting patiently for you to notice it. Let me tell you a story. Not a true story in the factual sense, but a true one in every way that matters. Picture a lighthouse standing at the edge of the sea, lit every single night without fail, sending its beam sweeping steadily across the water, constant, unwavering, always available. And somewhere out on that dark water, there's a ship. The ship can see the light clearly. The ship orients itself by that light. The ship feels a little safer simply knowing the light exists. But the ship never actually comes in. Night after night, the light keeps burning. Night after night, the ship stays out at sea, circling, approaching, and then retreating again, always close enough to see the shore, and never quite willing to actually land. And the lighthouse cannot move. It cannot sail out into the water and physically drag the ship back to harbor. All it can do is keep burning. The question I want you to really sit with isn't how to force the ship to finally come in. The real question is, how long are you willing to keep being the lighthouse? And is being seen, but never actually reached the purpose you were put here to serve? Or is your light meant for someone who will actually come all the way home? A lighthouse doesn't dim itself or apologize for shining. It simply keeps burning until the right ship finds its way in. Love without action is a beautiful kind of cruelty, not intentional, not malicious, but cruelty nonetheless. Because you are not a statue sitting in a museum, meant to be admired only from a careful distance. You are a living, breathing human being with a heart that's completely real, with needs that are entirely valid, with a longing that deserves to actually be met. Not in silence. Not in the whispered subtext of almost but not quite. You deserve to be chosen. Not reluctantly, not fearfully, not halfway, but deliberately, consciously, with the full weight of someone's genuine presence standing behind it. And the painful, necessary truth of this whole moment is that you have to hold two things at once: compassion for this person's wound and a clear-eyed honesty about what you actually need and whether what's being offered to you is truly enough for the life you're here to live. Jung identified what he called the wounded child, the part of the psyche that carries our earliest hurts, our oldest betrayals, our deepest fears, and he argued that this wounded child never simply disappears with time. It doesn't age alongside the rest of the body. It doesn't magically become more reasonable just because the adult mind now knows better. It lives on inside the unconscious and continues quietly running the deepest programs of our emotional life, shaping who we love, and how much we allow ourselves to be loved in return, often without the person ever fully realizing it's happening. This person who loves you and keeps their distance, their wounded child, is running a program that insists love equals danger, that closeness equals eventual loss. And until that program is actually examined, brought fully into the light, felt through and grieved and ultimately transformed, no amount of love coming from you will ever override it. Because it was never installed by love in the first place, it was installed by pain, and it can only be uninstalled through the courageous, deeply personal work of confronting that original wound directly, not through anyone else's patience, no matter how endless that patience might be. This brings me to something important, something incredibly easy to miss when your entire attention is locked outward on this person and the choices they're making. The healing available to you in this experience does not require their healing. The growth that's possible for you doesn't require them to change at all. It requires you not to become someone different, but to grow, to expand, to move through this pain in the direction of deeper self-knowledge, greater self-respect, and more clarity about who you're actually here to become. Because this is exactly where the great psychological and spiritual traditions all converge. The relationships that wound us most deeply are also our greatest teachers. And the lesson is always, ultimately, about ourselves. What does it actually mean to love yourself when someone you love can't fully be there for you? It means allowing yourself to feel the full grief of this situation without rushing past it, without numbing it, without intellectualizing it into something more manageable. It means letting yourself cry if crying is what you need. It means letting yourself feel angry at the situation itself, at the cosmic unfairness of a love that's genuinely real on both sides and still somehow isn't enough to bridge the distance between you. And then, once you've actually felt what you needed to feel, it means slowly beginning to redirect some of that energy you've been pouring outward back toward yourself instead. Not as some kind of strategy, but as a genuine act of self-devotion, as the beginning of a new promise you make to your own soul, that you will not wait indefinitely outside a door that refuses to open. That your tenderness, your warmth, your enormous capacity to love, none of that is a debt you owe to someone incapable of receiving it. Those are gifts you have to give, and they belong in the hands of someone who actually understands exactly how precious they are. Someone who won't just admire them from behind glass, but will actually hold them, use them, treasure them every single day. And to the person who is staying away, if somehow these words happen to find you, I want to speak directly to you too. Not in judgment, not in blame, but in love. I know what you're doing feels like protection. I know the story you keep telling yourself, that you aren't ready, that you're too broken, that you'll only end up hurting them, that this is somehow the better way. And I want to gently hold that story up and ask you, whose voice is that, really? Is it the voice of your genuine, grounded adult wisdom? Or is it the voice of the wounded child inside you, the one who learned that love was dangerous before they even had the language to understand what love actually was? Because those two voices can sound remarkably similar to each other. But one of them is protecting you from real, legitimate danger, and the other is quietly keeping you from the very life you came here to live. There will come a moment, and maybe it's already arrived, when the cost of staying away finally becomes greater than the fear that's been keeping you there. When the silence you've chosen starts sounding louder than the voice you've been suppressing all along. When the distance you've so carefully maintained starts feeling less like safety and more like a prison you built for yourself, brick by brick, with your own two hands. In that moment, you'll have a choice in front of you. You can stay inside the familiar comfort of the wound, inside the story that insists this is the careful, responsible thing to do. Or you can do something that requires every last ounce of courage you have left in you. You can move toward what you actually love, not with certainty, not with any guarantees attached, but with the simple, raw, terrifying, life-altering decision to finally stop protecting yourself from joy. The door was never locked from the outside. It never was. The only lock that ever existed is the one you installed yourself, and the key has been sitting in your hand this entire time. Now let me pull all of this together into something you can actually carry with you once this video ends. What's the one thing this whole experience has really been trying to teach you about yourself? Not about the other person, about you. About the way you love, the way you wait, the way you measure your own worth through the lens of someone else's availability. About the gap between the love you're able to give freely and the love you've actually allowed yourself to receive. Sit with that question, not to answer it right this second, but to let it slowly work on you in the background of your everyday life, quietly rearranging things, making room for a truth you're perhaps only just now becoming ready to hear. Because here's the deepest truth of this entire conversation, the one I've been building toward from the very first word. Love is not scarce. I know it doesn't feel that way right now. I know when you love one specific person with this exact depth, it seems impossible that any other love could ever measure up to it. But the love you're capable of giving, the depth and warmth and generosity that already lives inside your heart, that isn't finite. It isn't used up simply because it was once given to someone who couldn't fully receive it. It is, in fact, paradoxically, beautifully expanded by the experience. You are larger now than you were before you loved this person. You understand more. You feel more deeply. You've navigated terrain most people never even come close to approaching. And that expanded, weathered, deepened capacity you now carry is the beginning of something, never the end of it. You are not too much. You are not someone who loves too hard or feels too deeply. You are someone who simply arrived a little too early, or they arrived a little too late. Or the timing was imperfect in some way that life sometimes arranges, not out of cruelty, but out of its own strange, inscrutable wisdom. And the love that's actually meant for you, the love that won't turn away, that won't manufacture distance, that won't love you in secret while refusing to love you out in the open, that love isn't some fantasy reserved only for the lucky few. It's every bit as real as the love you're already capable of giving, and it's searching for you right now with the exact same intensity you've been quietly carrying in your own heart. This is what I know. This is what I genuinely believe. Not because the world is simple, or because love comes with any guarantees, or because wounds heal easily on their own, But because I've seen firsthand what becomes possible the moment a person finally stops fighting for a love that cannot come toward them and instead starts walking toward the love that's already on its way to meet them. Something opens up. Something that was once locked suddenly becomes available. And it never begins with the other person changing first. It begins the moment you do. The moment you decide, with the full, clear, courageous authority of your own soul, that you deserve to be fully loved. Not partially, not conditionally, not from some careful distance, but fully, completely, out in the open, out loud. This person cannot stop loving you, and they feel they must stay away anyway. Both of those things are true at the same time, and both of them, in the deepest sense, are actually about them, not about you. Your worth is not measured by their fear. Your love is not diminished by their distance. Your story is not finished simply because of their silence. You are standing at a threshold right now, not at the end of something, but at the very beginning of it. And what's waiting for you on the other side isn't loss, it's you. More whole, more clear, more deeply yourself than you have ever been before. Step forward. Not for them, for you. And if this reached you today, know that it reached you exactly when it needed to. No sooner and no later, because you were finally ready to hear it.